The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. I'm Land Rover owner John Costage. I'm your host for today's episode. I guess this month's episode. It is February 2014. We want to thank, first of all, Graham Aldis for joining us at the last episode, talking about his videos that he's created that are Land Rover focused. And if you're new listening to the podcast, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And if you're not driving, why don't you go ahead, sit back, open up your favorite beverage, and join us as we talk about fun Land Rover things. At least we think they're fun.
Go ahead, open up two.
We'll see how long this goes on. Maybe you might need to.
We might.
So as I said, I'm John Costage. I have several Land Rovers. One is back on the road, and you'll hear more about that later in the episode. That's a little teaser. It's a 109. And sitting to my left...
I'm Harold, and I'm addicted to Rovers.
And this is Dave Carroll. I, too, am probably classified as being an addict at this point with all of my discos. And, you know, I spent a lot of time on the trails.
And I'm Morgan, and I'm getting there with my addiction. Hoping to get my addiction back on the road.
Morgan, there is a 1967 Land Rover 2A for sale in the Pittsburgh area.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
It's $7,000.
Morgan, in case you're wondering where, I posted a link on the Fort Pitt Land Rover Group Facebook page earlier today.
Excellent.
If it's still in as good a condition as it looked like in the 5-year-old picture, it might be a good deal.
Yes, and he did. The gentleman did say that it had been sitting for several years, and it's probably all dusty. But first up,
that would be the least of its problems if that's all.
Well, he said that they do drive it regularly, though.
That's good.
That is good.
First up, the news: Jaguar Land Rover sales for January of 2014. I know Jaguar was up.
Yeah, Land Rover was up a little over 11%.
I think Jag was up 31%, so good for the brand. Things are continuing to go up. So things are going so well that Range Rovers in some countries are in a 4-month waiting list. That's the new version, and they said the volume is going very, very well. Some countries, according to Edmunds via Land Rover Vice President, is a 4-month waiting list. And they're working 24 hours a day, 5 days a week in Solihull. On the new car front, they are restyling and I guess they're completely, looks like it's almost completely from the ground up, a whole chassis and everything. The Freelander LR2, as we know about it in North America, there's some spy shots out there showing the look. It's is following the new corporate image, kind of seems to be based on, from what I'm reading, on the chassis of the Evoque. And they're talking about a launch maybe late 14, early 15, sharing some powertrain parts with the Evoque. Possibly
that makes sense,
turbo
of
diesel.
Course, because when the Evoque first came out, it was actually a Freelander concept. So for them to share some platform backwards in this case, but it makes sense that they're associating the two brands.
Right. And they continue to talk about having a front and an all-wheel drive version, which is kind of new for Land Rovers. You know, all vehicles up until the Evoque had been four-wheel drive.
Well, if you consider the first-generation Freelander really was a front-wheel drive car with some drive tapped off for the rear axle.
Yeah, it was 90-10, right?
Something like that, with a viscous coupling between the front and the rear. It really was a glorified front-wheel drive vehicle. So, and it used front-wheel drive parts in its creation. So it's not that much of a stretch.
And if you had good tires on it, it would go wonderful places.
And not arguing capability at this point. At this point, we are not having that discussion. We are merely talking technically about the platform.
And dear podcast listeners, I am my very first Land Rover was a Freelander, and I have a warm place in my heart for my mighty Freelander.
Which is why he will still be known as Freelander John.
I have no problem with that. I wear that proudly. And
it was to amaze me that you admit that was your first Rover.
We're going to go there? Are we going to go there? It was a fantastic automobile. It had some reliability issues.
It's just poking the bear.
I know you are.
2 words, Dave. Rainbow Pride.
We're not going to talk about the Barbie car. Let's not do that. The Freelander is also getting winter testing, so it's out and about, and they are testing it. And there's also discussion of possibly a hybrid unit, which is not surprising, and also a 9-speed automatic.
That's just not all that surprising.
No, it's not, but yeah.
I know it sounds like a large number, but it's just not.
Well, it helps with gas mileage, and it helps and everyone's has more and more gears now.
Yeah, and it helps on the trail because sometimes one gear's too low and the next one's too high.
Yes, as a little teaser for later in the episode, as we experienced on the trail yesterday. And
so sometimes more is good.
And finally, in general news, Land Rover has applied to trademark the word Landy, Landy, as a name, apparently, not only as a vehicle, but also for associated accessories like clothing, models, franchising for vehicle dealerships.
Yeah, I'd assume they're just trying to preserve their brand there. I don't think anything's going to come out under the actual Landy brand.
You would hope.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Unless it's trimmed in bamboo or something, and you get your Landy Birkenstocks to go with it.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Landy's a short term that they use in the UK for Land Rover, right?
That's correct. Like we would use Rovers here, Landy over there is the same idea. I've heard it used here too by many people. But,
yeah.
And I think maybe that this trademark is perhaps a way for the corporate to control the use of that nickname.
I tend to agree. Yes.
Or control the misuse of it if they see fit.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, if you trademark something, then you definitely want to control how it's used.
And that's their argument for people that in this companies in this country definitely, but I think other places in the world use it. Businesses that cater to the Land Rover owners that had the word Rover in their name are being shut down because it infringes on the trademark. And I think that this is more along those lines.
Interesting. I don't know that many people are aware of this, though. When you do trademark, it is on a country-by-country basis. So you do need to go out to each country and register the trademark in that country. It is possible that you could register, say, Landy in the United States and not have it registered in Canada because someone else has registered it already. So there are not insurmountable issues, and they are not trivial to when you say you trademarked it. The question you need to ask is, what country is that trademarked in, and how many other countries have you trademarked it in?
Right, it is country by country and subject to the laws of that country.
Yes, right. And this article is from the UK, so my assumption is it probably is in the UK, at least where they're trying to trademark initially anyways. But if they're smart, and they are smart, you would do it in your major countries.
Or at least shrewd.
Shrewd. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about, and I suspect this will generate a lot of conversation, especially as we are, for the most part, heritage fans of Land Rover. I use that in the nicest way. And there was a talk interview, I think it was a presentation by Land Rover's chief designer, Jerry McGovern, Gerry, I got my letters confused. And he was speaking at an auto expo in India, and this was earlier in February. And he said some interesting things. I say interesting because they will cause consternation, I think, in the Land Rover community, especially those listening and speaking on the podcast today. So I'll read some of this because I think it's important to set the base for our conversation. So he was talking about the Defender replacement, or whatever you want to call that, DC-100 or whatever. They seem to drop the DC-100 moniker. I don't think
that was only one concept for a possible Defender replacement.
Yeah, that was a trial balloon, as they say, and I don't think that trial balloon went well. But
that trial balloon was made of lead.
Yes, it definitely was. So he's saying that they want to broaden the appeal and sell more units, and they want to move up to 100,000 units a year, which is a 5-fold increase from the current Defender. And so these are some things he said. He said, the current Defender, and this is quoting him according to this article, the current Defender has never sold on its design and has changed very little over the years. What we are working on is something that will be more desirable to look at. The traditionalists might not like it, but they will have to live with it. It will still be as capable as before, and there will be references to the old model. It might even have a spare wheel on the back. The important thing is to get the proportions right, give it a distinctive silhouette and wider appeal. A Defender doesn't have to look overtly functional. We are taking a more sophisticated approach.
Where do I start? He's right in that you have to sell a certain number of units to make the thing commercially viable and to justify the cost of developing the product. He's right. Whether he needs to turn his back on its heritage or not, that could be debated quite a bit. I think, maybe you need to broaden its appeal, but do you need to make it not look functional in the process? I mean, it's important that you don't lose the capability, and he's saying that he doesn't want to lose the capability. So that's one in his favor, definitely.
I don't completely buy that, but continue.
Well, whether or not you believe it, whether or not it'll happen, but at least he's said it. So that's one thing in his favor. But you start really trying to make it all things to all people, and it becomes really nothing good to anybody.
Correct.
And it already has, he says he wants to give it a more distinctive silhouette. I don't think you can get more distinctive than what you already have.
Right, because it doesn't look like anything else.
Right.
Yep.
And people use it as it's an icon. And an icon means something. That means it's well designed. That means it's, maybe not well designed, but that means that it's something that stands out, it's singular, and it's instantly recognizable. I saw, that's why Rovers North has a sightings whole feature that they have, because it is an icon. It is something that people cite and people look for, and it associates itself with other things that people enjoy or like or have other hobbies. I saw today, and I haven't submitted it yet, so I'm not going to tell you where I saw it, but I saw an LR4 used in an ad for another product in an email that I got, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's an LR4. Just go, oh yeah, that looks it. So another sighting. So even admittedly, it's not a Defender.
Your 6th teacup.
I am up to 5. I got number 5 this month, and I need 6. Yeah. I took one on the trail. No one, hardly anybody noticed, but
I noticed.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, I noticed after you mentioned it to everyone.
Well, yeah, I have enough. I can.
By the way, I'm holding one of my teapots, and yes, I got another.
So it's an iconic.
Very subtle, John.
It's an iconic image, and I think I get the sense that. Yeah, he might. I don't know that he's a Land Rover guy, is what it really comes down to. I don't think he gets it.
He's not a Land Rover guy. I don't think he gets it. And clearly, I think he doesn't like the design, and he just wants to put his own touch on the corporate image. And this is the one throwback to something that he wasn't involved with. But, like you say, it's an iconic shape and an iconic look. That really just is a complete argument against his statement that it's never sold on design. Because it has sold on its design, because it is that look, and it is that look that's made Land Rover what Land Rover is. I mean, Land Rover had that look in 1948, and it's I know I'm a traditionalist, so I'm he's saying that I'm not going to like this, and he's right. But I mean, I have good reasons, I think, and people like the shape, people like the look of the Land Rover. It's what makes it what it is.
I think I have to agree with you, Harold. I mean. It's an iconic look. It's phenomenally functional. And that's what that look says to me. If you take a modernized vehicle, I think you can do a lot of the things that today's Defender does, at least to the civilian marketplace, with a modernized design. And modernized, I mean, something that looks totally different. But will it be a Defender? I'm not sure that it will, because let's face it, the Defender is a military vehicle,
or a farm implement, depending on your frame of reference.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about the Defender itself, since the name change, I think I would characterize it as a military vehicle first,
and the name would lend itself to that feeling as well.
Yeah.
The discussion I had with somebody recently, and this made a lot of sense to me, and I can see it. This guy's. There's been a lot of discussion. You had the DC 100 concept. You have this gentleman now coming out and saying things which we'll call them controversial because they want the model to be more desirable. In his words, more desirable, more sophisticated. It's possible that I can see down the road you will have two Defenders. You will have the Heritage Defender, and it will continue. They will find a way to keep that model going because it does sell. It is a military vehicle. Military buys a ton of those, and I think they want to continue to buy those. And I think you'll see the Defender Heritage, or whatever term you'd like to see, a legacy model.
I would call it the real Defender and the poser.
And then you will have a new Defender, which will be this more sophisticated version, if you will, which makes a lot of sense because when you really look at the Range Rover, they've done the same thing. The Range Rover has a traditional look, a traditional feel. Then they broke off and still have another Range Rover, and it's more sophisticated. It's more desirable.
A little more cutting edge in that sense too.
Exactly, and it's sleeker, and it's better, and it has the bells and whistles.
That's fine, but don't call it a Defender.
I think that's something. That's when I do agree with him on that you'll have to get over it. I think that whether they call it Defender or not, I don't know what they're going to do, obviously, or what their intention is. But I think that's something that if they do call the new one a Defender, you just have to deal with it. But I think my point, though, is I think they're setting this up, and I think they're making concerted effort to set this up to say, we're going to have two. Even though they said we're not. But I think it's a way of saying there's going to be a new model coming in, and then they'll find a way to keep that old one there because it is
position the Defender as a sub-brand then, again, like they're doing with Range Rover.
Very potentially. How they'll exactly do it, I don't know. But I think you'll see two models. I think when this shakes out in, say, 5 years, I think you will see two models. You'll see a Heritage model, an Icon, whatever you want to call it, and then you'll see the new one, whatever you want to call it. The Defender 2, and it will be... It'll continue out there, and
that's an interesting idea.
And then you can also, it's still available. The new one is available in all markets, the United States. The old one still not available in all markets because it doesn't meet regulations, but it's still available.
I'm in complete agreement that that would be the best solution overall if they can do that, and if they can somehow manage to maintain, like you said with the Range Rover, a little more of the design cohesion while they implement it, that would be much, much better. The DC 100 just was nothing like a Defender. You could not see the family lineage at all.
You had to look very hard and with special glasses.
It did start to grow on me, though. It wasn't completely horrible.
I could live with it, but I think it needed different brand positioning, perhaps. But and again, where you're going, John, with the multiple models, I could like that idea, I think, and that could grow on me. However, I think it's possible to make a Heritage Defender or an Icon Defender, if you will, that would be a new model that could be available in all markets, but still look utilitarian. And then they could have one that's more edgy, and they could really have both available in both markets. I think it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be all new or not all, or all old. It can be a combination in between, but still have the right vibe to it.
Well, you have to wonder if maybe if they were to go that kind of a route, if it doesn't end up being the same direction that they went with the H1 Hummers that the military uses. The agreement with the U.S. government's NTSB was that, or maybe not the NTSB, maybe it's the National Highway Traffic Association, but the agreement was that those would never be made available for civilian purchase because they didn't meet any of the safety requirements.
That could certainly fit your point about it being a military vehicle and keep that strain of military. Maybe that keeps the Heritage version. Yeah, I see that. I see that happening. Although, granted, the Hummer was slightly different. It started out as a military vehicle, truly first, and then became civilian. But your point is well made, Dave. And we're certainly going to watch this one. This is something that is near and dear to our hearts as everybody certainly in the panel knows, I have a Defender, and I think everybody in there who's right-minded Land Rover Landy person would want a Defender.
The more we talk about this and the more new articles that come out, the one thing that keeps coming through is that the Defender as we know it will be dead. But hopefully something good will come in its place.
I can only think to second Harold's thoughts. I mean, whatever comes next, we can only hope that it'll be as impressive as what's come before.
Yeah, I agree. So as long as it's as functional, even if it's not a functional design, and hopefully maintains some semblance of the heritage of the Defender and the series before it.
It has to work and it has to be cool.
That's the final word for now. Time for the M word.
Harold's M word.
In a previous episode, we heard about Nicholas Otto and his engines. Today, let's look at several of Otto's associates and the innovations that inspired an industry. After the success of Otto and Langen's atmospheric engine at the 1867 Paris World Exhibition, N.A. Otto and Company soon outgrew their facilities in Cologne. With money pouring in, they were able to find a much larger space across the river in the town of Deutz. In 1872, the company was reorganized as Gasmotorenfabrik Deutz, or the Deutz Engine Manufacturing Company. To help run the newly expanded company, Gottlieb Daimler was hired to manage production. Daimler was an engineer and a gunsmith, with experience in engines and toolmaking. Daimler also brought with him a talented young engineer named Wilhelm Maybach, who would be the chief engine designer. Daimler also hired engineers Franz Rings and Hermann Schum, and it was this team that was largely responsible for Otto's new four-stroke engine design. Following the tremendous success of the Otto cycle engine, Daimler and Otto disagreed on the direction the growing company should be taking. Otto preferred to focus on large engines for stationary use, while Daimler wanted to make engines that were smaller, lighter, and faster for use in transportation. Unable to resolve their differences, Gottlieb Daimler left Deutz in 1880, and he took Wilhelm Maybach with him. Daimler and Maybach opened a shop in Stuttgart and set about the business of designing a compact, high-speed engine for use in transportation. By 1885, they had their engine and mounted it in a crude wooden bicycle chassis for testing. Maybach was able to ride the Daimler Reitwagen, as it was called, for 2 miles at a speed of 7 miles per hour. It was the world's first internal combustion motorcycle. The following year, the Daimler engine was tested in a stagecoach and in a boat. This was the world's first motorboat, and was so successful that boat engines were Daimler's main product for years. Daimler also created the first airship when he installed an engine in a hot air balloon. Daimler's mission was to build fast, lightweight engines for use on land, on the sea, and in the air. In fact, these 3 uses were the inspiration for the 3-pointed star in his company's logo. Meanwhile, 60 miles away in Mannheim, a young engineer named Carl Benz was experimenting on his own engine designs. Unlike Otto's 4-stroke engine, Benz's concept had only 2 strokes. In 1879, he perfected his design and was awarded a patent for his 2-stroke engine. Benz partnered with a local bicycle shop to build engines, and also to pursue his lifelong dream of inventing a horseless carriage. Not wanting to simply convert a stagecoach, Benz designed a purpose-built 3-wheeler. It was the first vehicle designed specifically to produce its own power. And on January 29, 1886, Carl Benz was awarded a patent for the world's first automobile. By 1888, Benz had refined his design, and he offered his Benz Patent Motorwagen as the world's first commercially available automobile. That same year, his wife Bertha and their 2 sons took one of the Motorwagens on the world's first road trip. Traveling 66 miles to visit her mother, this was an amazing feat, as she not only had to keep it running, but she also had to find fuel along the way, as gasoline was only available at pharmacies and only in small bottles. During this trip, Bertha Benz also invented the brake lining, when she hired a local shoemaker to nail scraps of leather to the inside of the brake shoes. In the 1890s, Daimler Motors was having financial difficulties, and investors were threatening to merge the company with Deutz, despite the bitter disagreement between Gottlieb Daimler and Nicholas Otto. Both Maybach and Daimler were forced out of the company, but continued their work in secret at an abandoned hotel. In 1894, Maybach designed his third engine model called the Phoenix. It was the world's first four-cylinder engine and had several other innovations, including cam-operated valves and a spray nozzle carburetor. Daimler and Maybach sold the rights to the Phoenix engine to British industrialist Frederick Sims. In an interesting transaction, Sims paid the Daimler Motor Company a hefty price on the condition that Maybach and Daimler returned to the company. He also obtained the rights to use the Daimler name, and his company became known as the Daimler Motor Company Limited. It is believed that the first car built in Britain was a Daimler, and Daimler limousines were the preferred choice among royalty for decades. Back in charge in Stuttgart, Maybach was as productive as ever. In 1900, despite family problems and the death of Gottlieb Daimler, he designed an all-new car inspired by racing. It was long, wide, and low, and his four-cylinder engine produced an astonishing 35 horsepower and a top speed of 45 miles per hour. Austrian dealer Emil Jelinek promised to buy 36 of the new cars on the condition that they were named after his 10-year-old daughter, Mercedes. The new car was a huge success among European high society, and in 1902, Mercedes became a registered trademark of the Daimler Motor Company. Sales were also strong for Benz & Company, but by the early 1920s, global competition and a weak German economy had both companies in trouble. In 1926, they merged, and the name was changed to Daimler-Benz. All their products were branded Mercedes-Benz, in honor of the Benz patent and the most important Daimler model. Even today, Daimler, the world's oldest car company, is regarded as one of the world's leading car makers. And the world's first engine manufacturer, Deutz, is still a world leader. Like most everything else, automotive engineering has become a truly global industry. But it's hard to imagine what the world would be like today if it weren't for the pioneering vision of Otto, Daimler, Maybach, and Benz, the Gang of Four from Germany.
Time for the trail report. We've had two interesting trails happen in North America, trail rides happen in North America that we actually have attended, and we thought we'd talk about that. First up was the Winter Romp in Maine. Dave, you were our correspondent.
Yes. Well, as many of you know, winter has been a little rough here in the northeastern United States. Consequently, Winter Romp was quite the experience this year.
Where does it take place, Dave, just for those who don't know?
Winter Romp takes place in the towns of, between Waterville and Benton, Maine.
Again, where does it take place?
Which would be about an hour south of Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
So
it's a field. It's somebody's farm.
It's a combination of private and public lands, including snowmobile trails, logging roads, logging trails, and power lines. So there is a good mix of terrain for varying levels of skill for people to get out and give it a shot in the snow. This year, of course, though, was a little different. I've been to the Winter Romp once previously, and it was not any big issue. And this year was dramatically different because there was lots of snow this year. I actually drove up in a big snowstorm, which resulted in the trip taking nearly twice as long as it should have. At one point, we observed 5 inches of snow falling over the course of 1 hour when we stopped for lunch.
Yikes.
Yeah, it was kind of exciting.
Makes you want to abbreviate your lunch break, doesn't it?
Or extend your lunch break.
Yeah, we were in Newburgh, New York at the time. It didn't make any difference to us.
Either you hurry up and eat and get back on it before more comes, or you stop and wait for it to all be done.
Nah, it slowed us down a little, but it didn't present that big of a challenge, honestly. I had the truck prepared and set up right, and, we just took our time. So, upon arrival, we discovered that if you stepped off the trail, you had pretty easily 2 feet of snow that you were stepping down into. So I can only imagine that anybody that was out there breaking trail for the event had quite the challenge.
Yeah, there's few vehicles that can get by in 2 feet of snow unless you have treads or...
Yeah, I got off the trail a couple of times, and I didn't have a lot of trouble. But at the same time, it wasn't any walk in the park either.
Well, so what? The snow was 2 feet deep plus on the. You're saying then it was packed down, and
yeah.
Okay,
in a lot of places it was packed. It stayed cold enough the entire time. Now I left Sunday, so people that wheeled Sunday may have had a somewhat different experience because it did seem to warm up on Sunday. But prior to that, it had stayed cold enough the whole time that it stayed relatively. Although you could pack it down, it did stay kind of granular, which in a lot of cases is worse than it just getting packed and hard. So,
did a lot of people have problems? Were trucks capable, or were people prepared for this unusual weather?
I saw a lot of people with all-terrain tires, very stuck. People with all-terrain tires without chains seem to be having a lot of trouble. I know a couple of people with LR3s and some series trucks that had some severe issues until they chained up.
So how many trucks showed up, and what were the flavor? I've
not seen an actual count. I know that the prior year that I went, which was 2 years ago, they had 104 trucks. I'm going to guess 40, 45 trucks.
Well, that weather storm came up from where you probably got a lot of people coming from, which was New York and D.C., so that probably cut down on attendance.
Yeah, I did see people from D.C. Obviously, I came from Pittsburgh. We had people there from Akron. Lucky 8 made it from Buffalo. And then everywhere in between.
I gotta wonder if there's a lot of people out there that are just so tired of winter that they just didn't want to go to another winter function.
Well, especially in that storm, because that was a nasty storm. We in Pittsburgh we got like a couple inches out of that, and or maybe we got 4 or 5, but still was nothing like they were getting a foot and a half up the eastern seaboard.
Right, we sort of skipped off the edge of a lot of the storms this year. So up there, they've gotten really, really hammered. So if people are just tired of winter, and they don't really want to go out, plus if it's really actually coming down at the time, that can be a disincentive. And yeah, it's capable, and yeah, it's fun to go out, but I mean, you're at the same time, you're really kind of beat down by it all.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely the case.
So what trucks did show up?
So there was a nice mix of both new and old. We saw a lot of series trucks. The Winter Romp was originally started out just being an event where there was nothing but series trucks there. So
that's all there were back then.
Well, you know what? I honestly don't know how long it's really been going on. I guess I could probably do some research and find out. But yeah, there were series trucks. There were a lot of series trucks. There were a lot of very nice series trucks. Some really impressive, nicely set up, nicely restored vehicles, or nicely maintained vehicles. We saw a lot of newer trucks too, though. We saw a number of LR3s, LR4s. As always, there are always a lot of discoveries. There were some P38s, at least a couple of P38s, and
got to be a Freelander. Come on, tell me.
Not one.
Oh, Dave.
Sorry.
You could lie. Come on, brother.
There were a lot of very well done Range Rover Classics also.
Oh, those are nice. I was like,
and obviously, Defenders also.
I remember a number of years ago watching a video, I think on YouTube, of one of the main events when there was a Freelander there, and it was pulling out the tow truck, which was stuck.
Good deal. So are these organized trails? Is this on your own? Do you have a trail leader? I mean, I'm sure you observe the usual things of traveling in groups, but I was curious if it's more of a trail led or free event.
It's really kind of a free for all. Everybody meets at the host's house after breakfast at one of the greatest delis on earth, Big G's. From there, we meet at our host's house in Benton, Maine, and then proceed to the trails in groups. And everybody just kind of bunches together with people that or people that look like they might have similar skill sets with you, so that
how would you characterize the trails? Are they difficult, hard? Is it a variation?
I think on an annual basis, they change. I think that what we saw this year was moderately brutal.
Now, is that because of the amount of snow, or was that because of a technical challenge because of the amount of snow?
I think that the groups, because of the amount of snow, the groups got mixed up, and there were a lot of people that really, really struggled on trails that in years when there's less snow, the trails that they were on wouldn't have been even really all that noteworthy. There were some trails that are rough no matter what, that were pretty well impassable to all but the most heavily modified vehicles. And sadly, we ran into some situations where it became necessary to help a lot of people out, and that made it a little stressful, I think, for some of the drivers, because there was a lot of time spent sitting.
So are the trails open? What's the like terrain in that part of Maine like? Is it hilly? Is it trees? Rocky?
That's forested, relatively wet. I know that we've encountered some peat bogs in the area.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
There are also beaver dams and ponds with beaver lodges along a number of the trails. Most of those we didn't really get over to this year. There are some gentle rolling hills. It's generally forested, though.
It's the same trails every year, right?
Yes.
Okay. So people can show up and sort of know what to expect, except for the variable of the weather.
Well, and the logging. I think the logging has got to play a factor at some point, because they're actively logging some of these areas, and that's going to cause things to change year to year.
And how much whining took place?
Oh, there was no whining.
That's true. Listeners, you may want to go out to winterromp.org, winterromp.org, and I did notice there's a link for attitude, and the first thing is no whining.
Referring to the noise emitted from humans and not from a gearbox that is worn out.
That is correct. It's imperative that you have an appropriate attitude and understand our approach to this event. Practice radical self-reliance. Off-road driving is a group effort, but you're responsible for yourself, your well-being, your preparedness, your happiness, etc. The group will assist you if you get into trouble, but don't count on any hand-holding.
And that really says it all. We're all there for each other, but you better be prepared just in case.
Were you prepared, Dave?
Yes, I was.
Did you get stuck?
There was one climb where we crossed a stream and had to make hit a pretty steep incline that I never saw. I know that there were some guys that did make it up this particular trail, but in the time that I was there paying attention, I didn't see anybody actually get up it. So I did get winched up one time. All in all, it was a great trip. And if Bruce Fowler should happen to listen to this, I do want to say thank you very much for hosting this event yet again.
Morgan, why didn't you make it?
Oh, I'm sort of tethered to the office right now, unfortunately. I've been meaning to get up there the last couple of years, so
That's not
hopefully
far for you, right?
Oh, not far at all. No, a few hours.
Because for Dave, what it would take you normally without conditions?
It should take me between 12 and 14 hours. The trip up took 26 hours.
Wow.
Yikes!
That's a long time to be sitting in a vehicle with you, Dave.
Even in a disco.
Tell me about it. I thought it was a long time to be sitting with me, too. Although there was some time that I spent in a panic in a parking lot in Massachusetts, laying underneath the truck, letting it defrost on me, swearing at it.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
now you got to tell us a story.
Yeah, so I'm not a good passenger when my wife's driving. Her driving is generally speaking fine, but she's running in a truck with no sway bars, and a lift and big tires and in the snow with a bunch of idiots in little front wheel drive cars all around her. So I'd driven for about the first 10 hours and maybe a little further. We ended up in Massachusetts. And finally I said, all right, you drive. And we were caught behind a bunch of plow trucks puttering along at about 15 miles an hour. And they finally pulled off. She pulled out into the fast lane to go around some of these people. And I settled into the passenger seat to try and fall asleep for a little bit. And she says to me after about a half hour, "Hey, Dave, what's wrong with the truck?" And my response was, "What the bleep that out? What do you mean what's wrong with the truck?" And she said, "Oh, I put my foot on the gas, I floored it, and it won't go." And I listened to it for a minute. I thought, it sounds like she's in third gear. And it's not shifting. So I had her pull off the highway and down into a parking lot. And I started the truck and I shut the truck off a couple times. And I quickly realized that there was no sign of any kind of a check engine light or anything like that. So I'm running through my head trying to think, what could this be? Felt like it was in third gear. Is it in limp-in mode? There's nothing flashing. It's a D2. There ought to be something going on telling me that something's broke.
Even if there isn't, there's often a light telling you something.
Right. Whether I want to see it or not.
Right.
So I'm trying to think, what could it be? I crawl under the truck and decide I'm going to check the transmission fluid. And, of course, the D2 doesn't have a tranny dipstick. So I open up the fill hole and nothing comes out, which kind of concerns me. So I put another quart of transmission fluid in, and it starts running out and subsequently covers me in transmission fluid to go along with the salty slush that's dripping all over me at this point.
So you're well preserved at this point.
Oh, yes.
So how cold is it?
It was about 33.
Okay.
Just cold enough that the little bit of heat coming off the truck was actually making everything underneath it melt really quick while I was laying in it. So I close the transmission fill hole back up and take the truck for a spin, and it runs through first and second and gets to third and then doesn't want to shift any further. So I come back and start poking around, and a guy pulls into this parking lot. Apparently we'd pulled over in the parking lot of some little auto shop, and the guy brings us out some clean paper towels and stuff to dry off a little bit with. And I start talking to him about, where I can get someone to take a look at this thing. And he said, well, you can come back in the morning. You really can't leave it here unless you're going to stay with it. And he said, but if you run down here to this AutoZone, they can probably do some more diagnostics, and I'm thinking AutoZone. Oh, I'm not betting on it. I figure maybe I'll drive it a little and see what happens. And it was entirely going to be on side streets and surface roads, so it wasn't going to be back on the highway. And as I'm walking around the front of the truck, and I had the hood up at this point and was trying to make sure that my battery was firmly connected and there wasn't anything going on that might be messing with the voltage, I shut the hood and I look up, and at some point my wife or somebody had turned my snorkel around so it was facing forward, and it was consequently frozen over solid.
No air intake.
So
Yeah.
the engine can't breathe.
Yeah, I thought, well, I'm suffocating the engine. No wonder it doesn't want to shift. It can't do anything with what it's got.
Surprised it made it into third at that point.
Well, there was like a pinhole right in the middle. So it was getting a tiny little bit of air.
Yeah, but again, I wouldn't think it would rev up enough to make it into second from that point.
Whacked that a couple of times and took all the ice off it. Yeah, the truck ran great. I had a beer before we went anywhere and got in the passenger seat and went to sleep.
So how long did it take you to get home then?
Being as I had my wife with me, it became necessary for us to do some things that she wanted to do that didn't involve bouncing off of things and, you know.
Right.
So you had to do some girl stuff on the way home.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is you didn't encounter any travel problems on a return trip.
No, none at all.
That's good to hear. I was worried about more weather or other mechanical difficulties.
Well, she did make me go to the most haunted lighthouse in America, supposedly.
That's in Maine?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was Owlhead Light, and there was nobody around. And we're walking up to this place, and there are these two creepy little old people that apparently walk up there every day that offered to help us push our truck out if we were stuck. And I found myself looking at these two tiny little old people thinking, oh, goodness, if these two are all that I have for help and I need help that bad, I'm in trouble. I did get some cool pictures of it near the lighthouse, though. So I guess I got something out of having to go to that.
Nice. So, in conclusion, you enjoyed the winter romp. You would go back because this is your second time. Would you go, and you'd go again?
Yes, I would.
And how much is the event? I assume there's a fee.
Turn up and spend some money in Waterville, Maine.
Okay. Because a lot of those events are usually, $100 or something to register, so not bad.
Yeah, no, I could be wrong, but I believe that Bruce does this, puts this event together in order to promote tourism and, help support the local businesses in and around his community.
Out of the goodness of his heart.
It's a kick-ass reason to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, every night they have dinner locations for people to go to. Different establishments to patronize. Every morning you eat at Big G's, and generally speaking, everybody buys their lunch there too.
Yeah, actually, right on his website, there is no charge for the event itself, but the group does meet and eat at various local establishments during the event. Winter Romp is not affiliated with any Land Rover club, but clubs are invited to participate. Think snow.
Yep.
Well, speaking of snow, and speaking of winter, the Fort Pitt Land Rover group, of which all of the podcast members are a member, and Morgan, we've decided that you're a member of the club, whether you like to be or not.
I appreciate that.
It makes the math easier.
It does. It does. I think you have a sticker, don't you?
I do.
Then you're in the club. We'll get your dues later.
I'll send you a bill.
Yeah, please do. Those stickers are pricey. We have an annual trip that we call the Winter Classic, which is a takeoff from the NHL Hockey Winter Classic that used to be held on the 1st of January, which is when we started taking our winter trail ride. We've subsequently moved to February because it was colder and more snow, and
not knowing, of course, we're going to have plenty in January.
We had plenty this year in January, but anyway, so yesterday. Today is Monday, and on Sunday we went to some private land near Ligonier, Pennsylvania. We went off-road for the first time in this area in the wintertime, and had a nice time. I think I had a really nice time. I guess the best part was that I'll do the full thing for full effect, a 1980 Land Rover Series 3 109 XMOD FFR which means it's a 24-volt truck, was back on the road, went on the trail, better than ever. It has a new bumper, front and aft, and including an 8,000-pound winch, 24-volt. And we had a really, really fun, nice time. I did have a problem on the return trip. We're not sure what the diagnosis is yet, but third and fourth were not working as effectively. Thankfully, I only had to drive about 15 miles. 15. But still got home okay. Speaking of food, there's a wonderful pie shop near Ligonier that I highly recommend. They have excellent pies called the Pie Shop. Did get to play in the snow. It was a wet snow, and it would compact very well underneath the truck. I got high centered, I think 2 or 3 times, and had to be tugged or towed a couple times out of the way. And there was one hill climb that I purposely took me about 15 tries to get up, but I just enjoyed that immensely. Back up, forward, back up, forward, back up, forward. Finally found the right line and pushed enough snow out of the way, and I made it up.
Well, the truck looked good doing it, too. Had a great sound, lots of plumage.
Lots of plumage, beautiful plumage. Yes, not many rooster tails, though. Well, of course,
I'm referring to the black plumage.
The black plumage,
side.
the diesel?
Yes. Had the right throat to it, had the right belch. As all trucks should.
So we had, 7 trucks? We had 3...
I counted 3 discos, 1 series truck, the J word, the X-Man, and one of the unspeakable J word.
We had a Jeep, and
I said it was unspeakable.
Yeah, well, I know. I understand. But the guy's, he's a nice guy.
He is a nice guy. He's just misguided in his vehicular choice.
Well, we're trying to show him the way, the error of his ways. And we also, and our friend of ours who takes fantastic photography and has an Xterra joined us. Of course, that thing is modded out to all get out.
He is doing his best to make it into a series truck.
I was just saying, that's not an Xterra. It may have started as an Xterra, but...
Yeah, you look underneath, it's pure series truck.
Yeah, it well, that's before they changed them, and they were actually something that was in 1999. That was like a Xterra 1, and they were actually beefy for an Xterra. I'll put it that way.
Since then, he's done solid axles and leaf springs, and
yes,
the ridiculous 48-inch tires or whatever, 36 or whatever he's got. They're huge.
Yeah, they're outrageous. Yes. And so we had 3 Disco 2s. One was stock. He did have to pull over a couple times and ride with somebody else. The interesting thing about that, though, was the gentleman that had the stock Disco 2 is actually from England, so he's an Englishman. And he jumped in the truck at one point to ride with somebody else while he parked his Disco. And the other Disco he jumped in was owned and run by an actual Scotsman from Scotland. So we had a true British truck with a Scotsman and an Englishman in the truck.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we had 4 discos. That's right. Look at the
we had
picture.
4?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We had Mark, too. Mark, who couldn't join us for the podcast today. Right. Yes. That's right.
And Dave and Scottish Bob.
Dave and Scottish Bob and Englishman Nigel.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Right. That's right. So we had 4 discos, a Series 3, and an Xterra and a Jeep. That was good. We
did have 7 trucks then, yeah.
Yeah, and the weather was nice up until the very end, so we got on the trail about 10 o'clock. We got off the trail about 4 in the afternoon, stopped for lunch. The weather was wonderful, sunny, cold. It was around 32, I'd say, most of the time, which is...
until it started snowing, and then it got a little bit brutal.
And then towards the end, it started to snow. At the very end, that was until that storm came by.
And the wind picked up a little bit. And the temperature chilled down. And
it was time to go.
It was
generally a good day. No major problems.
Except for your transmission.
Yeah.
As a minor shifting issue, we'll have to sort that out. And of course, Mark's truck, he couldn't lock his center diff, so he was...
That's true. He stripped down half naked at one time
for a good bit, and he was sideways on the side of a hill for a bit. And...
That was fun. Morgan, you would have liked this. So you have this not fluffy snow, but the wet, crunchy snow, and of course it's warming up, so it's melting, so it's getting even more wet and more crunchy and
pliable, I think is the word.
And Mark is going ahead, and it's one of these, you think everything's fine, and all of a sudden everybody stops, and then there's a hubbub of activity, and you're like, what's the matter? And we all go running, and you see what's happened is he was on so it's a hill, but there's a flat trail, and it looks completely flat, and it's as if like kind of like a level train crossing, but there's a hill 45 degrees on either side of you, going up and, of course, going down. Trees, medium-sized trees on either side, and he's sideways on the trail, and he's almost completely turned around, and you can see where he went in the snow, got too close to the edge, and then all that wet snow became very slippery, and he slid down. His ass end slipped down, and he's aiming for some trees. And he's like, yeah, and he finally was smart enough to stop and ask for help. And we had to get another truck in there. Dave backed up and pulled him out, and got out okay, thankfully, because he was smart enough not to continue. I don't know that he could have rolled, but it was close. Depending on how he did it.
He could have ended up farther down the hill than anyone wanted to see him.
Yes, it would have been. Then it would have been real recovery.
Perhaps irretrievably so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, gravity helps. He'd have got down to the bottom eventually, and there would have been something down there.
Yeah, well, the trees would have.
Well, trim enough trees out of the way, he could eventually come down the rest of the way.
Yeah, I don't think he was ever in danger of actually rolling, just because.
Well, that angle, that hill was steeper than you think.
Well,
and if he caught something, he's a little more top heavy too.
Right. I mean, it's deceptive. That trail was deceptive because the snow made it look flatter than it was. At least when I broke the trail through, I was really pretty surprised at just how off camber the trail itself was.
And so the vehicle right after him was the Jeep. And he took him a few tries, but he started going sideways once or twice. But he kept on it, and I'd say the third or fourth try, he was able to. He kept on it, and it was really cool.
By aiming straight up the hill, he made it through.
He literally was, I'd say, almost 45 degrees, aiming up the hill, and kept going sideways. But while he was aiming at an angle, the truck was going forward at an angle, and it was really cool. I think we have it on video. Hopefully, we'll get that posted at some point, and you can see that. And it just climbed right through. And everybody else, and after that,
your truck did almost the same thing, by the way.
Did it really?
Oh yes, you were quite.
I was inside,
quite sideways, clawing your way through there, which was fine. You were maybe less out of shape than him, but I think that was by virtue of your longer wheelbase, making less of an angle. But you were crossed up,
and no power steering. All the power steering was in my arms. That's
what they call Armstrong steering.
Armstrong steering, yes. It didn't feel. I knew I was sideways, but I didn't think it was that bad.
You were.
Was I really?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know there was a tree. You were standing by a tree, and as I got close to that tree, I think I got a little too close and stopped, and thankfully still got out of it.
Well, you were starting to back out, and I motioned that you need to stay in it and keep coming, and you did.
So
I dive out of the way anytime you go by, John. So
it's smart move, Dave. Smart move.
We had the little mud hole that Mark's truck got stuck in.
Oh, that's right, with the mud hole.
And then brought Nigel through with his street tires, and he launched it.
That's right.
Got it airborne and hit a big snow boulder and crunched his bumper.
That's right. It was.
I hope we got pictures of that. That was mildly spectacular.
I think Dana had his video camera forward of that. I think he got that.
Good.
But I don't know if he got the whole crunching part. Really nice. Technical blue. Anybody know what the term of that blue is? It's
marine blue, or
I don't know that that's marine blue.
Well, marine blue is an old color from the series trucks age.
It's like an indigo blue.
Adriatic, I think, was what they called it.
Okay, but it seems brighter than Adriatic. But I don't.
Anyway, it's a nice medium blue that came on the 03 Discos.
I think that was on the Freelander too. I think the Freelander won, but also they had that same color. I recall, and I think that was indigo blue.
I have lost track of the names of all the different blues they've had.
And there was actually an article, which I should have saved, about Land Rover colors. They were talking about it, maybe for another time. But a nice color. There was a little mud hole that turned to the left, and as you went up, then there was then on the right side there was kind of a bigger little boulder hill. And then this is not it wasn't like a hill, but it was just more of a bump that you had to get over, a berm, a big berm,
kind of like a plow ridge.
Plow ridge, thank you. And then snow packed into it, and then couple discos went through and kind of cleaned it out, and then his disco went through, and of course we told him to give it a lot of welly. He actually was wearing wellies, which was helpful. And so he came through, and I think on the second attempt, he launched it up out of that on the right side, launched it out, and as he came down, there's this boulder of snow, which had to be 2-3 feet high around. He pushed it, and as he pushed it in front of his wheel, it popped into the lower part of the bumper and crushed out a couple little pieces. The chat room tells me Monte Carlo blue. That's exactly right, Dave. Well done.
Yes.
Monte Carlo blue. Nice color. So
yes, it is.
It was a nice color, regardless of what you call it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's helpful to get it.
And it was accurate. A nice truck, and Nigel was certainly a nice gentleman, and he was not too upset about the bumper.
No, he didn't. No. I did like his comment though on Facebook later. I became friends with him as I found out he was on the Facebook, and he said, my truck outing. These guys are serious. Like, we're not that serious, Nigel. So, Morgan, when you coming down to join us for the winter classic?
Hopefully this coming winter. I would love to have my Series 3 ready.
Well, if you want to come on down, we'll make a point of scheduling around your schedule. Whoa.
Well, within reason, you have to make it here during actual winter.
I'm happy to do that.
Mind you show up when it's not winter, we'll still take you out running.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good places to go.
I'm always up to hit the trail.
Plus, you could show up. We could do a podcast from our lovely studio here.
That would be quite the change from usual.
So that was the FPLRG, the Fort Pitt Land Rover Group Winter Classic. Did anything else we want to say about it?
It was fun. Next year, maybe we'll have more.
I actually want a little anecdote. I have something called a Fitbit, which is like a pedometer, and I wear it all the time, so it counts my steps and my movements. And normally I get I should get more, of course, but I get about 8,000 steps a day, especially when I go to the office during the weekday. And I knew this would happen, but I got back from the trip, and it said, "Oh, you've done very well today. You met your goal. Goal's 10,000 steps a day, and you met your goal 10,000." And then it went, "You're special. You went over your goal, 17,000 steps." Now I know I walked a lot from taking pictures and getting out of the vehicle, but that's all from that truck just bouncing up and down.
Sure,
it was counting
it's
all
just
that.
An impact sensor.
It was counting all that. Well, there's no way I walked 17,000 steps.
No, that's a long distance.
That's a
Every bump in the truck would be a step.
I think so. It did that before. The last time I had the Fitbit and took the truck out on the trail, it was like jacked up.
So do you feel it in your arms today?
Actually, not bad. No, I really wasn't. My arms were actually pretty good. Although that wheel, there's a couple times you just have to let the wheel go, and it's like a flywheel. It's wheeling back and forth on its own, and you're like, I can't touch it because it'll rip my hand off.
Thumbs out.
Oh, definitely. Oh, this is after thumbs out. I know enough not to do thumbs in. And
I know that you know, but.
Oh no! I'm not attacking you or anything.
And that's the downside of no power assist. There's also really nothing to slow that wheel down from every feedback when you hit a rock or whatever with your tire. It's going to feed back that much more into the steering wheel.
Yep. The one little thing, and we kept when I drove to when I met up with Harold to get the truck, I drove my Jetta. And so we get in the Jetta, get out of the Jetta, get into the 109, and kept saying, "This is not the Jetta. This is not the Jetta." So you get it.
That's your mantra now from now on when you drive the 109.
Yeah,
not the Jetta.
Not the Jetta. Because while the Jetta is a diesel and the 109's a diesel, the Jetta is a stick and the 109's a stick, but they completely different ways of driving them.
The only similarity is what you put in the tank.
That's exactly right. But it had been a while since I drove it, but you have to pay attention, and I know that's everybody says that, and like your thumbs in, don't put your thumbs in the wheel, steering wheel, all that business. But even where the disco's more forgiving, when you're just doing routine stuff, so you're not going through any technical challenge on the trail. You're just driving down, say a standard road that you could take a Chevy Monte Carlo on and be fine. A disco will be fine, and you can relax. You can't do that in a series truck. You still got to pay attention. You still got to be on it, know what's happening, know what's going on, and be ready for something to change. Good example. We're making a bend, a right-hand turn, and I had figured out how to make the turning radius, because again, it's not the Jetta, so the turning radius is way different. So I get the turning radius, but as I'm turning to the right, it catches on some snow, best way I can explain it, and the wheel starts to go, so the truck wants to slide and go to the left, and I overcorrect way too much, because again, it's not power steering, so you're just yanking it, and I go to the right. I end up in the snow ditch on not a ditch, but a snow bank is a berm of snow. Crawled underneath it, got underneath the truck and high centered me right there on the side of the road for no reason. Everyone's like, "Hey, were you playing?" No, it just got away from me. Because even on something as simple as a right hand turn, you need to pay attention.
Yeah, the truck just turned off the pavement, if you will, right into the snowbank.
And that wet snow got underneath, high centered the truck, and I think Dave had to back up and yank me out of there.
Yep.
So that's it. There's your fun on the trail. Just got to pay attention.
My snatch strap got lots of use yesterday.
I did get to use my winch too, so I was very excited by that. That was the winch worked. Oh yeah, we were in this open field. The snow was so deep that I high centered the 109, and it was again wet snow, and it became like concrete because it would get wet and compact, and was that crunchy snow, so it became almost like concrete. Couldn't move forward or back. The only truck that was available was the Jeep, so he backed up a little bit. We put the winch. There's no trees that were easy to get to, and it was a flat ground. And so we hooked up to the Jeep, hit the winch, and I started pulling the Jeep back because he couldn't come out of the snow. Finally, we did get some traction and get out of there.
The other detail on that is he backed up to hook up to you to pull you out, but got himself stuck in the process.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
So he couldn't have pulled you out. He couldn't have backed up closer to you. So really, with the winch, you got him unstuck and you unstuck at the same time.
I didn't. I was unaware he was stuck. Okay.
You got him pulled back a little further, so he got a little run and got himself unstuck, and you pulled yourself out at the same time.
Nice. So if you want to see some photos, go out to FPLRG.com and look for events and look for Midwinter Classic. I haven't gotten the photos posted yet, but I will soon. I was too tired last night to even...
So hold your clickers, but go there soon.
That's right. Hopefully by the time this podcast is out, I'll have the pictures posted and you can see them. So our next story is something that's driving related, but not specific to Land Rovers, but still interesting things that we follow. And the story is another one from the Autoblog podcast. They have a podcast too, but the Autoblog website is America's motorization past its peak. So a study done by the University of Michigan's Transportation Research Institute leads you to believe that car consumption may have reached its peak. So they did a study of households from 05 to 12, and also examined America's 30 largest cities in that same in 07 to 12. And the interesting stat I think to use out of this is 2007, 8.7% of U.S. households did not own a car. So it's 8.7 did not own a car in 2007, and the figure grew to 9.2% that did not have a car in 2012. So that's a 5-year difference and a 0.5% increase in not owning a car. While it seems small, it's still appreciably noticeable. The largest cities, certainly they have a greater rate of non-car ownership. New York City topped the list at 56.5% of families without a car. The 6 largest cities all had carless rates above 30%. So while on the one side, that's good, that there's less cars on the road, which means it's easier for me to get around, but that's also could portend bad things for the car industry in general.
Does that really mean that there are less cars on the road? I don't know that's necessarily the case.
Well, I'm thinking maybe over time, Dave.
Well,
maybe not immediately.
If fewer households are owning them, that's one thing, but I may be taking up the slack there in the size of my fleet, because I can support several carless households with just what's in my backyard. So.
But how many are actually on the road though? Even if you still we
didn't say on the road. You said ownership.
But you can only drive one at a time.
Yeah, but see, now you have choices.
I'm not against it. I have multiple cars myself.
Yeah, you're the last person who should argue against this.
I'm not arguing against it.
Wait. But so many of John's cars remain lawn ornaments at Harold's shop.
Only one. No, I have 3 functional.
I'm
But
astounded. I don't know what to say.
Me either.
Well, you saw the one yesterday, so that leaves only one that's non-functional.
Why? I figured that there was an imminent disaster just waiting to happen. I mean,
Dave, come on, brother.
Dave, you're the last person who should say that.
no. I always make it home. I've only had my truck towed home, I think, twice in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and then you go for your parts truck for all the parts to fix it so that you can drive it again.
Yeah.
And then you go get some splints and cast and et cetera for yourself.
Yeah. I've dislocated and broken a few things.
Okay, all right.
But the focus of this article, though, to bring up is have we passed, has America passed its peak of vehicle ownership, of vehicle-ness? It's very possible. We've talked about this before, too, because I also don't think that younger folks care much about cars and driving as I think my generation does.
Well, I think maybe we're looking at a shift here between cars as transportation and cars as a hobby.
I completely agree with that.
And, given the scope of our forum here, I don't know this really affects us much because we're all of the enthusiast type, which really isn't going to be affected by this.
Well, I would disagree. Over time, this will affect us because that potentially could mean less money towards roads and transport. Again, this is a small decrease
in the pool of available stuff for us to snap up later. Yeah,
right.
Okay,
but over time, this can have that increase because then you have less. If there's less motoring public, then they have less and there's less of them. They have less influence in getting the things that they want and getting things done. Also, if you have less, if America's buying less cars, that's what this might indicate. Then we also have less influence over America has less influence over what is being produced. We already know China's increasing as a market, so therefore they are going to start dictating more what cars are like than we will. America's the number one market at the moment, but China may become the number one market, in which case at that point, Land Rover in particular goes, oh, China wants this kind of car. Screw you, America. You're going to get what we give you. So this does have an effect. I know it doesn't seem like it. It may not have an immediate effect. Not today, maybe not even in 5 years. But over time, if this trend continues, there can be this ripple effect in a number of ways. Just as the increase in car ownership has certainly affected everybody. I'm sure that horse people, farriers said, cars, they're not going to affect us. Well, yeah, they will. Over time, they will.
Personally, I hope that coming generations all buy, hybrid vehicles, and I hope that they all use public transportation, so they leave lots of gasoline left for me.
I think that, I see where you're going with this, John, but for one thing, funding for roads maybe isn't as much of an issue for us, especially those of us who have plates that say no road required. As an off-roading thing, roads are sort of a luxury that we don't necessarily have to have. I mean, yeah, they're nice, but on the other hand, that shouldn't set us back that much. As far as the influence of the American market, I've never been one for American styling and the other countries kowtowing to our desire anyway, because it seems like every time they try to make a vehicle that's more appealing to the American market, I think it ruins it. So I like the unmolested, non-American versions of things typically more than I like what's sold here. So, yeah, maybe that's not a bad thing either.
One thing we did miss, if we can skip back just a moment, because we can do that in podcast land, is a trail report that we missed, and that was the Vermont Overland Winter Challenge. And our correspondent in Vermont is Morgan. Yes,
and this is another one that I would love to attend down in Rockingham, Vermont, which is southern Vermont. They have Vermont Overland has started putting on the last few years a number of overland events. They have the rally in the summer, and this year they put on a winter event, a 50 vehicle event, pretty much same as your other winter events, the Romp and all of that, just picking some local off-road trails and ski trails and the like. This one, they actually also, it's an actual challenge. So it is, it's a rated, competition essentially. But looks like a lot of fun. They seem to put on good events.
And these are the same guys that also put on the Vermont Overland Trophy last year.
Yes. So
which I should note, I am trying, if any of our listeners have entered in next year's upcoming Vermont Overland Trophy, if by chance you should decide that you do not wish to partake of that event, please let me know, because I would like to acquire your spot in the event.
And I believe that one has sold out already. And that's why you're searching.
Within 48 hours of being opened up.
Wow, that's quick.
Yeah, they're very popular events. The Rockingham area is very convenient for access from New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and obviously the rest of Vermont, and has some great access to. We have state roads up here, which are still technically state roads. They're just completely unmaintained and not necessarily maintained on maps. So those often become great links between the normal dirt roads and private property trails.
What's the cost again for the Vermont Overland? Is it like $500 a truck, $200 a truck, something like that?
Yeah, I believe this year it was $500 a truck, in 2014 the event is $500 per truck. There are two truck teams. With 2 people per truck, a driver and a co-driver.
Yeah. Well, hey, yeah.
Morgan, I missed. What did you say when the Winter Vermont was?
It was actually this past weekend, so it was February 21st through the 23rd.
So if one had a little extra time to kill, one could go to the Winter Romp in Maine, and then the following week, I think it would be to the Vermont event.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That would sort of make the grueling drive for some of us a little easier to amortize, if you will.
For sure. Now it's only a 50 truck event, so it also sells out pretty quickly. But I don't think they've started planning the next one yet, but try to get in early on that if you want to attend both.
I think you'd want to plan ahead if you were really going to try to make 2 events like that anyway. So, planning ahead's always a good thing, but definitely in that case.
And for winter events, definitely plan even further ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's the 11th edition of the Centresteer podcast for February 2014. Thanks very much for listening. If you're a new listener, let us know what you think of the show. You can go onto our website at centresteer.com. That's CENTRE, steer.com in the British spelling. And give us some feedback. We'd like to hear from you. Have yourselves a great month, and we'll talk to you in March.
The Centresteer theme song, Sunset Rider by the Tritons, is available from Mivio's Music Alley. Check it out at music.mivio.com.
Is that it? Really? Nothing else?